Straight ahead on Law&Crime Daily. The Parkland school shooter penalty phase trial. The rebuttal case begins with some damning evidence.
What is that design on the boot, if I didn't ask you that before?
That's a swastika.
And week 3 begins in the Sandy Hook defamation trial.
People saying, this must be fake. He's an actor, he's smiling. You're out of character. All those things.
The gripping testimony given by a shooting victim's father, plus an unexpected early release in the Pike County massacre trial out of Ohio, what the unexplained adjournment could mean, and later, the North Dakota love triangle trial of Nikki Sue Ensel.
The last time anyone saw Chad Ensel alive was leaving bowling on December 30th, 2019 at approximately 10:30 p.m.
Prosecutors present their opening statement as the defendant is tried in connection with her husband's murder. Law&Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law&Crime Daily. I'm your host, Brian Buckmeyer. Jurors are back in court for the first time in more than a week as the prosecution begins its rebuttal case in the Parkland school shooter penalty phase trial. On February 14th of 2018, a then 19-year-old gunman opened fire at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. 17 people were killed and 17 more injured. In October of last year, the gunman pled guilty to all charges. He now faces a sentence of life in prison or the death penalty. On Tuesday, the prosecution began its rebuttal case in the penalty phase trial. This comes nearly 2 weeks after the defense abruptly rested its case, causing Judge Elizabeth Schreier to call the move unprofessional and uncalled for. In the days leading up to the rebuttal case, the judge ruled in favor of the prosecution, allowing the state to show jurors swastikas drawn on the defendant's boots and AR-15. On Tuesday, a Broward County detective took the stand virtually, explaining he met with the defendant at the hospital on the day of the shooting and collected items for evidence.
You came into contact with Nicholas Cruz?
I did.
And did you have occasion to take his shoes?
Yes, I did.
And what kind of shoes were they?
They're boots. They're black boots. This is one of my photographs, and this is one of the boots that I collected on that day from Cruz.
And does this picture, 26J, truly and accurately depict the boot that you took from the defendant?
Yes.
There's only one swastika. There's nothing on the second boot, correct?
On the left boot, no. I went through them pretty thoroughly.
Is this the same swastika, just a close-up picture?
Yes, it is.
Okay, the same boot. And what is it? What is that design on the boot, if I didn't ask you that before?
That's a swastika.
Joining us today is legal analyst Catherine Lizardo and co-host Terry Austin. Catherine, did the prosecution start off strong in the rebuttal case? If so, with what?
I think they did. As we saw, they started off by actually admitting the AR-15 gun, physically admitting it as evidence, and also the magazine and the boots with the swastika symbol on there. Those are very important because we've been seeing how in the defense side, they've been humanizing Nicholas Cruz. And we've forgotten about all of these physical evidence. But by starting off by showing how big and ominous that AR-15 is, that brings that memory back into the jury's mind. Now, just because the swastika and the AR-15 could be prejudicial to Nicholas Cruz doesn't necessarily mean that it's inadmissible or violates his due process. The Florida Supreme Court actually has had a separate case that allowed swastika to be admitted into evidence under circumstances that are more heinous than this.
Absolutely. Now, Terry, after the prosecution's rebuttal, I know we're looking ahead a little far. What happens next in the trial?
Well, you're right, Brian. It is coming to an end after both sides rest. I expect that we'll see motions. We'll see renewed motions. I definitely think the defense is going to make a renewed motion for a mistrial because we've seen that happen several times. And then I think, obviously, they're going to try to finalize those jury instructions. And, of course, we'll have to see closing arguments and deliberation. But deliberation is only going to be about the damages, as we know, because he's already pled guilty to all of this heinous massacre. So we'll see what happens after all of this, but they'll go straight to deliberations and we'll see how much, comes out, whether he's going for life or death.
Of course, again, this is not about a question of innocence or guilt. Again, as Terry said, it's about life or death. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, we turn to Ohio as George Wagner IV stands trial for his part in the Pike County massacre. But first, the Sandy Hook defamation trial out of Connecticut. Victim Dylan Hockley's father takes the stand to describe the fallout of the deadly shooting. Welcome back. As week 3 begins in the Alex Jones defamation trial out of Connecticut, jurors hear emotional testimony from the father of a Sandy Hook school shooting victim. Last month, Jones was ordered to pay more than $49 million in damages as part of a separate defamation case out of Texas. Jones could soon owe even more in damages as part of another defamation suit out of Connecticut. 15 plaintiffs sued Jones after he claimed the Sandy Hook school shooting was a hoax put on by actors. Jones has already been found liable for damages in this case, meaning jurors will now decide how much Jones should pay. On Tuesday, Ian Hockley, father of victim Dylan Hockley, took the stand. He told jurors his family was forced to take down a YouTube video of his son's memorial after it was bombarded with hateful comments about the shooting being a hoax. Later, he explained how he reacts 10 years after the shooting when people continue to call him an actor.
In what way or ways, if any, has the narrative of you being an actor, faking your child's death for some other purposes, of Dylan never having lived, affect your the way you go about that?
I'm very intentional to make sure that story is there, and I will warn the audience that we will be talking about the events of 12/14 because I want to establish my truth and my journey. So I'm both very definite I'm doing that, but I'm also aware that that could draw out someone who's there who wants to stop me, obstruct me, attack me. I'm just constantly aware that that's a thing. But in weighing those two out, this wins out that I'm going to tell this story I'm going to share about Dylan. And so I just have to be careful. I just have to be careful about where I go and speak, who I go to.
New York Times writer and author of the book Sandy Hook, An American Tragedy and the Battle for Truth, Elizabeth Williamson, has been inside the courtroom. She explains the impact she's noticed as Alex Jones hasn't been there.
I can tell you what the families are thinking and what they've expressed in the past in the first damages trial earlier this summer, that this is an act of cowardice, not to turn up in the courtroom, but rather to hold forth outside where he can control the floor, not submit. Once again, jurors after the first damages trial were saying that not only did they find that it was an act of cowardice not to turn up and face these families except when he's compelled to testify or chooses to testify, but really it's kind of it shows disregard for the judicial process in general. And you have to remember, of course, that the jurors are here because they believe in the court process and they believe in the judicial system. So for them to be here and have him not show up except to deliver this sort of tirade that he did last Thursday, I think reflects very negatively on him.
I would agree as well. Powerful words. Terry, emotional and heartbreaking testimony, but how does that translate to how much Jones will have to pay these families?
I do think that it will affect the jury, no doubt about it. When you have emotional testimony like that, the jury is feeling it. They're putting themselves in the place of these parents, and they absolutely are going to feel as though they need to award a large number. We saw that in Texas, a large number was awarded. I think because there are more families here, we might see a larger number. And the fact that Alex Jones himself expresses no remorse. He doesn't respect the system. And I think the jury sees that too. They are here and they are doing their duty, and the least he can do is to come to court. So I think the emotional testimony, the fact that Alex Jones is disregarding the system, all of that is going to weigh heavily on the jury, and I think we're going to come back with a large award.
Yeah, Catherine, Terry, and Elizabeth Williamson, I think, are kind of touching the issue slightly, so let's get right to it. Ian Hockley's testimony compared to that of Alex Jones on the stand last week. The comparison's got to look devastating for Jones, right?
Definitely. In terms of last week, we saw Jones testify in what looked like a circus trial because he was so uncontrollable by both the judge and his own lawyer, and also the plaintiff's lawyer. Everyone were having a hard time trying to control him and what his testimony would be, as compared to Dylan's father today, who was so emotional, and you really feel the damages that has happened to this family. His testimony is helpful with the damages side, even showing that after all of these years, he's still feeling that pain and suffering that no father should feel.
Absolutely. It's really a contrast. Makes it look one good and one bad. It's not something you want if you're the defense attorney here. Well, also in celebrity legal news, the Santa Fe County District Attorney says actor Alec Baldwin and 3 others could still face charges in the deadly Rush shooting. In October of last year, Baldwin was holding a prop weapon on the set of the Western movie. The gun went off and cinematographer Helena Hutchins and director Joel Souza were shot. Hutchins died as a result of her injuries, while Baldwin maintains he never pulled the trigger. Nearly 1 year later, no criminal charges have been filed in relation to the shooting, but Santa Fe officials say they could soon be on the way. This comes as the district attorney's office made an emergency funding request of more than $600,000 to continue the investigation. Prosecutors say they have not yet determined if charges are warranted, but say this could be a homicide case. A final report of the deadly shooting has not yet been released by the sheriff's office. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, opening statements are presented in the Love Triangle murder case out of North Dakota. Plus, the Pike County massacre. Court abruptly ends early on day 12 of George Wagner IV's trial. Welcome back. The Ohio trial of George Wagner IV unexpectedly ends early as he faces murder charges for his part in the 2016 Pike County massacre. George, along with his brother Edward Jake Wagner and their parents Angela and Billy, are all accused of having a part in the execution-style murders of the Roden and Gilley families back in April of 2016. All 8 victims were found shot to death, most in their beds as they slept. Initially, officials thought the murders could be drug-related, but later determined the killings allegedly stemmed from a custody dispute involving a child Jake shared with Hannah Roden. Jake and Angela both pled guilty in the case. They are expected to testify against George. A key piece of evidence in the case were shoe impressions found on the crime scenes. Investigators say Angela Wagner admitted to buying shoes from Walmart for Jake and George. The actual shoes were never found. On Tuesday, just as another BCI agent took the stand to testify about those shoes, the court recessed unexpectedly without any explanation. Testimony is set to resume Wednesday morning. Terry Court adjourned early, but there was no reason given as to why. What should we take away from that?
Well, you know, Brian, there could be a number of reasons for that early adjournment. As you said, the shoe expert did not want to take the stand, did not want to go before the camera, but apparently she did testify, just not before the camera. And before her, the other witness, he also talked about physical evidence. He talked about the guns and all of the casings that were found in the various incidents that happened in all of those 4 locations. So, you know, he talked about the rifle, there was a handgun, there was a Glock. And then afterwards, at some point, counsel did say they wanted to go through the evidence. And I'm thinking that perhaps because there is so much evidence that they needed to sort out, perhaps the judge gave them a little more time to do that so that when the jury does come back tomorrow, they'll have it all sorted out and he would not have wasted the jury's time. So it could have been something as simple as that.
Yeah, maybe there's a lot of evidence they just want to admit in quickly, and we'll see a lot of that, as you say, tomorrow or Wednesday morning, sorry. Well, Catherine, there are many victims in this crime scene, so prosecutors are focusing on one scene at a time. Is that the right approach here?
I think it is, because the prosecution said that they will present their evidence in order because of the fact that there are so many victims here. 8 victims of the Roden family were executed, like you said, mostly in their sleep, and 3 of the locations were in Union Hill Road and 1 location in the Left Fork Road. For the jury to compartmentalize and really visualize where each murder happened is very important, especially since they visited the site beforehand.
Yes, makes it a lot easier to digest in those small organized bites as they're doing there. Well, when we come back, we head to North Dakota for the trial of Nikki Sue Ensel. Opening statements are presented as Ensel stands trial in connection to her husband's murder. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. We head to North Dakota where prosecutors present their opening statement in the love triangle of Nikki Sue Ensel as she's tried for allegedly conspiring to kill her husband. Investigators allege Ensel was having an affair with a man named Earl Howard while she was still married to her husband, Chad. In late December of 2019, officials believe Ensel and Howard conspired to kill Chad for a life insurance payout, and just days after filing a $26,000 property insurance policy on the home Ensel shared with her husband. Investigators believe on December 31st, Ensel and Howard shot and killed Chad in their master bedroom with a shotgun. Days later, firefighters and police responded to Ensel calling 911 about a fire at the home. Investigators believe the two started the fire to cover up the murder. Police couldn't determine if it was Ensel or Howard who pulled the trigger. They are both charged with conspiracy to commit murder, among other charges. Howard pled guilty to conspiracy and arson charges and was sentenced to 25 years. Prosecutors on Tuesday gave a timeline of what they say happened in the days leading up to Chad's death.
While Chad was at his bowling league on Monday, that's when they went to the house between 7 and 8:30 p.m. so that they could collect property of Nikki's. After that, there's no more security video at the house because it was turned into privacy mode. While they were there, between that 7 and 8:30 p.m. time frame, they grabbed the propane heater from the garage and put it in the house. They grabbed a shotgun from the bedroom and they put that somewhere in the house. They got the shells for the shotgun and they loaded the shotgun and they left. They came back to the house on December 31st, 2019 at approximately 1 o'clock in the morning. Between 1 and 3 a.m. on December 31st, 2019, Chad Ensel was shot twice with a shotgun and left dead in the home. Before they left the residence after Chad was shot, they staged the room. They staged the bedroom to make it look like Chad killed himself.
The defense didn't present their opening statement Tuesday, but instead deferred it until after the state presents its case. Catherine, how was the prosecution's opening? Did they open with an airtight case?
I'm not sure about airtight, but they did present a very good opening statement there. I say that because it's so easy to understand what the prosecution was saying as to the facts, the details, and what Nikki did and this love triangle. They also presented how the why she took out an insurance policy before Chad died, and also that there's a love affair with this other guy, so that's why she murdered Chad. But we don't know who actually pulled the trigger, and that's the issue. What's fascinating is the prosecution actually charged her with conspiracy. So it doesn't really matter who pulled the trigger, I believe, as long as they can prove that Nikki and her co-conspirators were the ones who agreed to murder Chad. That's enough.
Yeah, but Terry, thinking about the defense, what if they just blame Howard for everything? Could that get Ensel off on a not guilty?
You know what, Brian? I think that's not going to happen. I mean, anything is possible, but I seriously doubt she'll get an acquittal. She was charged, as Catherine said, with conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to commit arson, and conspiracy to tamper with evidence. So for all of that, you just need that plan and that agreement. And even if somehow she convinces that jury that he did pull the trigger, the boyfriend, Howard, they're still going to understand and know she was the one who took out that insurance policy. She was the one who was in the home, the fire was set, and she is in this love triangle. And it is her motive that started this entire string of events. So I think even if they blame it on Howard, they're going to get guilty, at least on one of those charges.
And it'll be interesting to see what the defense is as they postpone that opening statement. Catherine Terry, thank you very much, and thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.